Have you ever wondered how much a miracle weighs? I'm not talking about the triumphant miracle that makes heavenly headlines, but about the one that happens at 3 in the morning, when the room is too dark for witnesses and a human heart starts beating again at the last second, with no one ever knowing why. What if I told you that every relief kept in silence leaves a hole somewhere else in the universe? That every pain wrung from the flesh of a sufferer must be accommodated, as if reality required an unforgiving ledger where debit and credit are written not in ink, but in light and blood at the same time. For this is the hidden scale that rules the life of Sariel, the healing angel. For countless ages, Sariel walked the white fire corridors of paradise, collecting in the crystal chalice attached to his chest the laments that rose from earth like bitter smoke. On each trip he dove among mortals, touched wounds that science had given up treating, inhaled tumors, depressions, memories of violence, and returned without uttering a word. His sky-colored colleagues called him bearer of the remedy and celebrated the freedom with which he moved between worlds, light above, gray below, as if there were no charge for exercising mercy in such absurd quantities. But there always was. No one suspected because Sariel, heroic even in pain, hid the true receipt. With each deep healing, a microscopic sliver of its essence was released, floating away like luminous dust that no one saw. It wasn't a metaphor, it was genuine erosion, a hemorrhage of being. He first realized it when he saved an entire village from scarlet fever in the spring of 614. The plague raged in the straw huts. Children betrayed death with dry well eyes. The few healthy adults dug graves before falling ill. Sariel slipped among them, invisible, and sucked in the evil like an inverted fire, extinguishing flames by devouring the oxygen in its own chest. As he returned, he stumbled on the amber steps that led to the chamber of seraphim. He felt lighter, but in the wrong way, like a pillar that has lost a cornerstone. He pushed the malaise down into his consciousness. He thought it was simply fatigue. It was then that he discovered the most deceptive force in the universe, the strength of denial. Decades later in Vienna, 1713, the plague returned to Europe in waves as black as the doctor's robes. Sariel entered a hospital rotting with groans, breathing in an air so thick with suffering that the ceiling seemed about to collapse. As he sucked in the disease, something snapped inside him, like ice cracking. He returned to the clouds, bowed before the throne, feigned normality. But that night, sitting on the edge of a nascent galaxy, he stared at his luminous palm and saw a tiny crack running from his wrist to his fingertips, glowing with the gray color of cold ash. There he understood the bill, but he also decided he would pay whatever it took. To give up on compassion would be to betray every child, every mother, every elderly person who was still waiting for help. Time in the sky runs differently, although men's pain always seems like the same wound begging for haste. Sariel began to measure his own deterioration with a cruelly simple method. He counted how many days it took him to recover. A minor miracle required minutes. Profound healings now required hours, then days, then entire weeks of retreat among nameless stars. The equation was ironic. The more powerful his touch, the more fragile he became. No one noticed, perhaps because angels rarely look into the mirror of weakness, or because paradise, exuberant in glory, does not favor the idea of decadence. Sariel, however, learned to read the murmurs of her own body of light. They echoed like cracked bells, announcing a party that would not take place. You may be wondering why he didn't ask for help, or at least permission to stop. The answer is written deep within his nature, overwhelming compassion. For Sariel, every human cry was a pin stuck in his eardrum, every tear a weight on his wings. How can one choose who suffers and who lives? Is it possible to point a finger? at a terminally ill person and say, "Wait for my recovery, I must spare myself"? He could not. And so, with each century, Sariel dove deeper into the well of other people's pain, like a diver searching for pearls, knowing that the air rope shortens with each descent. In the fall of 1918, during the Spanish flu, it was different. Millions were dying in a matter of days, fever and blood-staining makeshift sheets. Sariel hovered over Barcelona, Paris, New York, Petrograd, on routes that would make any traveler's head spin. In each ward, he sucked in the virus with his breath, and the victims burned in a suddenly cold calm. But when he was done, he could gain no height. He collapsed on the roof of an empty church, exhausted. Tiles shattered. A priest ran up, only to see a wisp of golden dust evaporate at his feet. Sariel had lost almost all of her shine. It wasn't the final fall yet, but the warning was clear. Keep going, and your fate would be star cream on the floor. There is something cruelly fair in the mathematics of absolute altruism. The more we give of ourselves, the more we prove whether love is genuine or vanity in disguise. Sariel never sought recognition, awards, or marble statues in the ziggurats of Eden. He sought silence, because silence, deep down, was the only atmosphere where one could hear the crack of a soul breaking to save another. And it never cracked as loudly as in the 1985 earthquake in Mexico City. Amidst ruins, screams, and smoke, Sariel found a little girl trapped under tons of concrete. His arm of light pierced the rock like a hot blade cutting through ice. When he pulled her out, breathing, he realized that 3 of his own feathers had turned to phosphorescent dust in the air. The girl smiled. Sariel closed his eyes and felt for the first time real fear of disappearing before everything was healed. Perhaps that's why the final dilemma hurt like a nail driven into the heart. It was in 2025, next year, maybe this year, depending on when you hear it. A mental health crisis has swept the globe. Reports from the World Health Organization have recorded record-breaking rates of depression, surpassing 300 million active cases. How to cure something so pervasive, so rooted in the invisible? Sariel understood. He would need to suck out not just biological illnesses, but despair, guilt, loneliness, a transfusion of emotional darkness. And that would be equivalent to tearing the thin veil that supported his last reserves of being. Here lies the question that shatters any tranquility. If you had the power to save millions, but knew that each life saved would steal part of your soul until it was dust, how many times would you say yes? 1, 10, 1,000? Sariel answered countless times without blinking, because in the abyss of true compassion, there is no room for mathematics of self-preservation. However, each answer brought him closer not only to a physical fall from the sky, but to something worse, the forgetting of who he had been. When the essence evaporates, only a shell remains, and shells do not sustain miracles. There are whispers above the visible firmament that certain archangels have noticed Sariel's belated hemorrhage, that they have noted in their scrolls of record an incongruity in his luminosity, that they have secretly called a council to decide whether to do the unthinkable, order him to stop. But how do you stop a river that insists on flowing even when its bed cracks? Some have suggested confiscating the crystal chalice. Others have proposed trapping the angel in a stasis chamber, sacrificing a few lives now to spare the guardian from himself. And lessons echo in this impasse. Sometimes an altruist's greatest enemy is precisely the person who tries to keep him safe, because salvation for him is to continue giving until the end. While these debates took place in halls of ethereal quartz, Sariel gazed from the edge of a teal nebula at the endless stream of human requests. He saw mothers praying for their addicted children, the elderly begging for a breath of peace, young people begging for meaning after traumas that no one understood. Each plea was a comet crashing into his consciousness. And there, on that edge of the cosmos, he made the resolution you will soon witness: to heal humanity, even if his name is erased from the book of the living. You may feel right now a tightness in your chest, not from illness, but from the question, who pays for what was relieved of me? If you are alive today, perhaps you owe a slice of your breath to Sariel's invisible courage. What if everything you received for free cost the glory of someone who didn't complain? Does that change the way you view other people's pain? Don't expect easy answers. What's coming is a dive into an ocean where every drop is a story of renunciation. We will discover how far the flame of a being made of light can burn without turning into absolute ash. Follow every second, because Sariel's next breath may be her last, and when the final moment comes, perhaps the echo of his sacrifice will reveal the hidden cost of all the miracles you have celebrated without realizing it. Sariel appeared in the heart of paradise when eternity still seemed immune to cracks. In that primordial moment, the walls of star quartz gained a pink reflection, as if the first earthly dawn had crossed dimensions just to greet him. The elders recorded the phenomenon in the books of first fruits and emphasized that the newcomer belonged to the order of the bearers of remedy, a restricted circle of angels in charge of transporting human pain to the altar of balm, a region beyond the Sapphire Nebula, where all suffering was converted into silent courage. For Sariel, accepting the call was as natural as breathing. However, no one had explained to him the profound cost of that office. His appearance reflected the glory of the kingdom that had created him. Hair of liquid copper, broad wings whose outline burned in navy blue, eyes permeated by emerald green, flashes. In the center of his chest was a living chalice, a translucent crystal that pulsed like a second heart. It held a drop of absolutely white light, a reservoir destined to receive future torments. Among brothers in the trade, Sariel's vessel drew attention for its rare transparency. Inside, it could be seen a tiny whirlpool of energy that was already agitating, impatient, as if it sensed endless journeys. For periods of time that the human mind could not measure, Sariel lived according to the impeccable routine of the penitentiary cloister. Paradise was arranged in 4 concentric rings. In the 3 inner rings, seraphim, cherubim, and dominions ruled harmonies that kept the cosmos aligned. The healing angel inhabited the 4th ring, an isolated region where an almost liturgical silence reigned. There, each day began with attentive, listening to the vibrations rising from earth, because in the heavens, pain translates into unexpected music. High notes when a heart breaks from frustrated love, low notes when despair lingers, dissonant like rusty metal when violence explodes. Sariel deciphered these nuances like a conductor who finds an out-of-tune violin in the midst of an infinite orchestra. Whenever an urgent cry arose, he would pass through the arch of whispering clouds, a living portal that opened passages to the material world. On his first descent, he landed in a Phoenician village ravaged by fevers. A touch on the burning forehead of a boy was enough for dark vapors to leave the child's body and sink into the chalice, tinting the liquid silvery gray. The effect on the village was instantaneous. The night brightened as if the sun had risen twice. When the angel returned to paradise, he felt a slight fatigue, something so subtle that he attributed it to beginner's zeal. It was his first unwritten lesson. Compassion always exacts an imperceptible penny. As the centuries passed, Sariel became a well-known figure in the corridors of liquid light, where angels greeted each other with sparks of joy. Among his friends, Idir, guardian of celestial justice, and Athanael, chronicler of the Order of Registration, stood out. Elia had a proud bearing, read reflections under his pens, and knew how to detect lies in the scent of the air. Athanael, of an almost human temperament, carried a golden pen to record each gesture of mercy in the rosary of the centuries. Both noticed that Sariel's chalice darkened more with each return, but the healer smiled, changed the subject and moved on. His silence was not born of pride, but of fear. To show fatigue was to admit a limit. To admit a limit was to deny relief to those who cried out. When the plague struck Vienna in 1713, Sariel walked through the wards filled with groans and breathed in the disease like reverse fire. On his way back, he stumbled on the amber steps that led to the chamber of seraphim. His soul felt lighter, but in the wrong way, like a column that has lost a cornerstone. Still, he wore the serene smile expected of perfect creatures. It was then that he learned how denial becomes a vice. If you pretend to be strong long enough, everyone will forget to ask if you are weak. Decades passed. Wars multiplied wounds. Industrialization brought chemical burns. Urban melancholy manifested itself in bouts of loneliness. Sariel visited London, Madurai, Veracruz, and countless cities anonymously, leaving behind him a trail of recovery. Each descent required more time for convalescence. Each profound healing sucked a greater share of his essence. In 1918, when the Spanish flu killed millions, the angel toured crowded hospitals until his left wing lost half its splendor. There were no witnesses in heaven to that brief fainting spell on the roof of an empty church, only the crack that shattered part of the chalice. Elior was suspicious. During a patrol on the shores of the Lake of Eternal Radiance, he noticed that Sariel was staggering as he landed. He questioned him in a firm voice. He received silence in return. The loyalty of the guardian of justice demanded action, but friendship whispered patience. Athanael, in turn, began to discreetly record each flicker of Sariel's light. In the margins of the parchment, he wrote a phrase that still burns among the columns of Eden. The flame that shines brightest casts the longest shadow. Time, however, does not forgive those who pretend not to hear it. In 1967, the Supreme Council met in the Hall of the Seven Rhizomes to analyze reports of microleaks of energy detected by the harmonic rosette, a cosmic tuning fork sensitive to any imbalance. Numbers showed that the losses coincided with missions of the carriers. The scribe Metatron presented the protocol of equilibrium, suggesting healing quotas to avoid implosion of the light. Elior endorsed. Athanael hesitated. Sariel remained silent, for revealing his own degradation would mean accepting orders that would delay aid to mortals. Nothing was decided that night, but a seed of fear germinated. In 1999, 4 minutes before a total eclipse, the harmonic rosette sounded a red alert for the first time in 15 millennia. If 3 bearers performed large-scale healing simultaneously, the system would collapse. Stand-down orders were sent, but Sariel was already descending toward a Russian hospital where burned children awaited sedation. He saved them all. He paid for it with part of his brilliance. By the time he passed through the pearly gate, the slate-gray stain had covered 2/3 of the wing. Athanael wept, but kept the secret, convinced that the truth required precise timing. The year 2025 arrived, and with it a tsunami of depression shook humanity. Reports from the World Health Organization revealed more than 300 million active cases. Experts declared a planetary emergency. The council met again. Now Metatron proposed confronting Sariel directly, either reduce interventions or accept confinement in the stasis chamber. During the session, voices were raised. Arguments crossed the space like sparks, but the recipient had heard it all from the quartz balcony. He realized that the dilemma had ceased to be personal. It had become a watershed for the very concept of mercy. At that very moment, Sariel walked to the garden of deferred expectations, a field where flowers only bloom when someone on Earth dreams again. Almost all of them were wilted. He touched a dry petal. He felt it vibrate between his thumb and forefinger, asking for help. The chalice in his chest boiled, taking on a graphite color. He knew he could cure the cloud of global despair by sucking it whole, but this gesture would crack the crystal and disintegrate what was left of its form. Before deciding, he spoke to the wind a single phrase that the universe engraved on the walls of comets. Better that one heart breaks in heaven than millions on earth. Athanael, hidden among the opaque bushes, heard him and tried to intervene. He reminded him of the beauty of existence and the gratitude of those who loved him. Sariel just smiled, not with sadness, but with certainty. He told his friend that a flame does not negotiate with the darkness, it just burns. Then he extended his hand and invited the chronicler to record the final moment. Athanael trembled, but he wrote, because stories need witnesses even if they hurt. At that moment, Elia appeared, panting, followed by messengers carrying the decree of suspension. The guardian of justice looked at his friend and saw not weakness, but determination without return. He expressed love in 3 words: there is still a choice. Sariel inclined his head in gratitude, but his eyes released silvery flashes, defying tears. He took flight, leaving trails of sparkling sparks that consumed themselves as quickly as they were born. As he crossed the portico of the burning friezes, his footsteps dripped grey light onto the floor. Apprentices pressed against the walls, fascinated and terrified. It was the last time they saw him fully. After that, there was only the sound of wings beating beyond the curve of the firmament, toward the point where all pain converges before screaming. Paradise watched in silence. The harmonic rosettes sparkled in cadences never before recorded, seeming to foreshadow a celestial earthquake. Elior clenched his fist, perhaps wanting to snatch his friend from his own destiny. But justice does not nullify free will. Athanael recorded everything, every breath, every vibration, every flash that left the angel towards the unknown. And he wrote in a margin that few will read: when compassion decides to burn, no order can extinguish the match that it itself becomes. Thus ends the second part of this journey. Sariel now flies towards a horizon where even the light fears. Melting, he carries with him the dense cloud of human despair, aware that there may be no return, but as long as there is a single breath of healing needed on earth, his step will not falter. Those who watch from this side of the sky hold their breath, feeling that if he falls, an entire constellation will fall with him. Those who breathe on earth, even if they do not know the price, will subtly notice when peace comes like a breeze. In a dawn of anguish, the breeze will have a name, although no one will pronounce it. It will be the echo of Sariel, the angel who decided to pay for every penny of human misery with his own eternity. Sariel crossed the portico of the burning friezes as if he were crossing his own skin, and reached a region that no celestial map had dared to name. There were no columns of light or chance there, only a thick, endless fog made of what remained of human laments before they ascended to the heavens. Philosophers call that threshold the echo threshold, a point at which anguish still carries the temperature of the flesh, but already has the density of the spirit. Sariel felt the warm vapor envelop his wings, impregnating each feather with the mass of millions of stifled sighs. For the first time, he recognized with brutal clarity the exact volume of global sadness. It seemed like a tide ready to swallow everything. The chalice in his chest reacted. The graphite gray liquid boiled, emitting a buzzing sound that resembled electric current tearing silk. A microscopic crack opened in the crystalline wall, and a smoky thread of light escaped, weaving arabesques in the air. Sariel instinctively put his hand to the crack, as if trying to staunch a wound, but he drew back. Covering the crack would mean delaying the inevitable. He knew, if he wanted to save humanity from its dense night, the vial would have to break. Still, the instinct for self-preservation, as absent in angels as it is present in earthly creatures, whispered doubt. What if, when it breaks, there are no fragments left to carry the essence back? What if the explosion erases even the memory of the one who heals? On the other side of the threshold, beyond the curtain of mist, hovered a circular platform suspended over a bottomless abyss. It was the confluence of all contemporary pain, a cosmic funnel where every cry, every anxiety attack, every suicidal thought materialized into dark filaments that spiraled, seeking outlet. In the center of the disk floated a pulsating sphere, black as liquid obsidian, the seed of collective despair. As Sariel approached, the sphere throbbed, as if sensing the arrival of something or someone capable of challenging its silent reign. He landed, and the impact of light against the platform made the ethereal metal vibrate. Instantly, strands of shadow attacked his legs, trying to trap him. With each touch, the liquid in the chalice absorbed bits of that darkness, and the crack expanded, spreading webs of fractures. Sariel felt the emptiness within him grow, as if his inner parts had turned to wind. Still, he took another step and spoke, not with a voice, but with pure intention. I come to take what hurts you. The sphere of despair responded with a deep note, a rumble like thunder dipped in water, and released a torrent of shadows. It seemed to rain living ink. Sariel opened his arms, allowing each drop to penetrate the chalice. The crystal darkened, until all trace of transparency was lost. Liquid could no longer be distinguished from wall, only an opaque core ready to implode. Meanwhile, in the corridors of paradise, alarms sounded. The harmonic rosette, touched by anomalous vibrations, emitted a sequence of notes that shattered windows of light in 1,000 colors. Messengers ran towards the room of the 7 rhizomes. Elior, already in armor, ordered an emergency corridor to be opened. If we do not arrive in time, we will lose Sariel and the balance. Metatron, however, raised his hand, reminding that no being except a voluntary bearer could bear that burden. Intervening could break the law of cause and effect, triggering a chain reaction in the 4 celestial rings. The discussion turned into a blaze. Athanael, still holding the parchment on which he had written Sariel's sentence, remained silent. He knew that every objection born of love could become an obstacle to the sacrifice that was being fulfilled. Back at the Echo Edge, Sariel staggered. His once blue wings turned leaden. Each feather gave way to shadow and brightness. The entire platform pulsed. With a crack, the chalice split from top to bottom. Light and darkness mingled within the vessel, like a storm trapped in an impossibly small bottle. A silvery glow shot out from the crack, illuminating the fog for miles. For the first time, the sphere of despair recoiled, shrinking in diameter, wavering. Sariel realized that the transfer was working. The more shadow he sucked, the smaller the seed became, but the exchange drained his very essence at a rate that surpassed any previous healing. It was in this fraction of eternity that the hidden antagonist revealed himself. From within, the mist emerged a gigantic figure, the mold of a faceless angel carved from solidified soot. It was Umbriel, Adverse Guardian, an entity created centuries ago to prevent any bearer from bearing more pain than the law deemed sustainable. Umbriel stepped forward wordlessly, his aura exuding a coldness that cracked the ground. His presence imposed gravity, making Sariel involuntarily bow. With an arm of coal, he trapped the hand that held the chalice and murmured in a voice of crushed rocks, "Limit transgressed. Burden must be distributed." He then raised his other hand, ready to tear the crystal and release some of the pain back into the world. Sariel reacted instinctively. With effort, he opened his remaining wing, striking Umbriel with an arc of light. The Guardian took a step back, but did not bleed. Shadows do not bleed. Sariel, however, felt his joints burn. like metal in fire. Each movement seemed to cost him a reminder of his own sudden finitude. Umbriel advanced again. He struck the chalice, producing a final crack, the one that announced total destruction. On impact, fragments of crystal flew, transforming into small suns that soon extinguished. Some of the absorbed despair leaked out, streaking the space like crows made of smoke. Sariel held his breath, raised his wounded hand, and sealed the leak with light taken from his own heart. Light not meant to be given, but which he gave anyway. In paradise, Elior felt the sting. The heart of justice vibrated in tune with the action taking place below. Ignoring protocol, he took up his ruby sword and threw himself into the portal. Atheniel ran after him, carrying the parchment with him. He wanted to be a faithful witness, no matter what the cost. When they crossed the portico, they saw first the shimmering mist, then Umbriel and Sariel in silent confrontation. Elior shouted his friend's name. The vibration of his voice shook the threshold, attracting the attention of the Guardian, who turned, assessing the potential threat. The pause was what Sariel needed. He used the moment of distraction to embrace the sphere of despair. He let it cling to the broken crystal, channeling the remnants of pain directly into himself. His entire body ignited in white flames. Umbriel understood the plan. If Sariel absorbed it completely, there would be no container left. The angel would turn to spark, and with him, the darkness would disappear. The Guardian stepped forward, but Elior stood in the way, sword in the way. There was no long duel, only a clash of intentions. Umbriel could not harm an archangel of justice without violating superior orders. He retreated, growling thunder. The sphere of despair shrank to a speck, then a thin line, then disappeared. Sariel stood, though his legs felt like glass, shaking. The tattered chalice hung from his chest like a dead flower. Within it, no light, no shadow, only emptiness. A breeze swept across the platform, and for the first time since the threshold had existed, the mist cleared, revealing distant stars. Elior dropped his sword and ran. He caught his friend before he could fall. Sariel, panting, felt the steady hand and smiled. He still recognized the touch of loyalty. Umbriel retreated into the mist, a mission aborted but not completed. He knew that, with the container destroyed, Sariel had nowhere to rest that pain if it returned. In practice, the healing angel had transformed into an hourglass with sand about to run out. An emotional fissure was enough for despair to flow. Back, Atheniel, already ready, raised the parchment and recorded every detail, tears mixing with the ink of light. He engraved the date, November 3rd, 2025, the moment when all human sadness would fit into a chest about to collapse. Elior lifted Sariel onto his back like a father lifting a feverish son, and stepped through the portal back home. But with each step, flecks of light fell from the healer's body, dissolving into the air. It was as if he were turning to dust before he reached home. Yet there was no regret on his face, only weary serenity. Behind them, the echo threshold, closed in satisfaction, for now the global groaning had ceased. When the two crossed the walls of star quartz, angels from all the choirs fell silent. They saw Sariel, once radiant, reduced to a translucent figure, almost a ghost. They saw the grey left wing, the torn chalice, the tired look of someone who had crossed an infinite desert. The notes of the harmonic rosette changed from alarm to lamentation, then to the murmur of a cradle. Metatron, watching from afar, closed the great book of protocols. At that moment he understood that no law foresees love that insists on breaking the cold account of statistics. Sariel asked for one simple thing: to sit by the lake of eternal radiance where constellations rest. Elior led him. Atheniel took a seat beside him, ready to write the last lines if necessary. As he touched the liquid surface, the healing angel felt the lake reflect new colors, greens, purples, golds, as if the water were dreaming within the dream. There, all the collected despair began to slowly dissolve, spreading across paradise, in the form of soft shimmers, visible even in the inner rings. Seraphim noticed and sang softly some ancient melody used to lull newly awakened stars. But despite the peace, the crack in Sariel's soul did not close. He understood that the void left by the pain also had a function, to remind him that there are limits even to absolute love. As he watched the reflection of the galaxies dancing in the water, his body lost another bit of light. He was not alarmed. He simply witnessed his own ephemerality with gentle surprise, like a child who realizes that night is approaching too soon. Elia asked in a breath, "Was it worth it?" Sariel replied with a nod. Neither yes nor no, but eternally always. Atheniel wrote the short phrase, aware that it would become an epigraph in future records. When the balm dries in the bottle, there is still perfume in the air. And indeed, in that breath, the angel's compassion contained a sweet scent that invaded the corridors, filling each being with longing without sadness. The celestial night wore on. The council would call a new meeting to decide whether there was a way to rebuild the chalice or whether another kind of miracle would be necessary. Umbriel would remain on the lookout, reminding them that balance exacts non-negotiable prices. But none of that mattered at that moment. All that mattered was the moment when an exhausted being of light allowed himself to rest on the edge of the cosmic mirror, while the very dust of his essence fell like diamond rain over fields beyond imagination. And it was in this tender silence that the universe learned a new law. Compassion, when it decides to bleed without reservation, pierces the logic of the possible. And, in the opened hole, a type of hope is born that not even the most solid despair can inhabit. Sariel stood by the lake of eternal glow until the last reflection of a constellation faded from her eyes. But heaven does not sleep, and soon news of her condition swept. Through all the rings of light, seraphim interrupted symphonies, cherubim left archives suspended on pedestals, dominions blocked the course of constellations for a pulse of time, and every gaze converged on the figure that shone only in spaced flashes, like candlelight fighting the night wind. No decree could ignore what had happened. The bearer of remedy had absorbed the collective despair of an age and shattered the chalice itself, dissolving into stardust. Now the question was not only whether Sariel would survive, but what would happen if the pain trapped in her body sought to return, with no vessel in which to replenish itself. Metatron convened the council the next morning. The Hall of the Seven Rhizomes was filled with murmurs as crystal doors swung open to reveal the curved bench of decision-making angels. In the center of the table floated Atheniel's scroll, detailing the sacrifice in gold ink. The pale chronicler stood a few feet away, pen in hand, to record the most delicate session in millennia. Ilior stood behind him, still in soot-stained armor. She held the ruby sword, a symbol of justice that now felt heavy as guilt. When all had taken their places, Metatron spoke in a voice of polished granite. "We have three paths. We can restore Sariel's chalice, forge a new holder, or allow despair to evolve unchecked, trusting in the resilience of humanity. Either choice will carry an irreversible price." The first proposal, to restore the chalice, required pure light matter collected from the aurora core, a region where comets are born and where even seraphim hesitate to enter, since the primordial radiation disintegrates memories. To bring fragments from this core, it would be necessary to send an angelic entourage equipped with dawn shields, risking losing their identity along the way. The second idea, to forge a new bearer, seemed more Pragmatic, to choose a young angel, train him in virtues, and implant a zero crystal. But the ancient laws were clear. Bearers are only born when creation itself declares it necessary, and creating one by force would be the equivalent of extracting a mountain root by hand. The third option remained, the coldest, to accept that human pain is self-regulating, that there are cycles of suffering and overcoming, letting destiny operate without direct intervention. This thesis sent shivers down my spine. It reminded me of the philosophy of the adverse guardians, whose zeal for balance dispensed with compassion when it threatened the system. As the council debated, Sariel felt lighter and lighter, not in well-being, but in substance. Tiny points of light came out of his elbows, his neck, and the folds of his wings. They floated over the lake, drawing fleeting constellations that died in seconds. Elior, seeing him from afar, understood that decisions needed to be made in hours, perhaps minutes. He left the assembly before consensus, crossed the corridors with thunderous steps, and knelt beside his friend. He touched his shoulder. He felt the touch sink like a hand in warm vapor. Sariel opened his eyes and smiled, more calm than sick. His voice was low but firm. Do not mourn what evaporates. Only mourn the love that never gives itself. That sentence fell within Elior like a seed that cracks stone. He understood that. There was no point in protecting Sariel against himself. The healer had chosen a destiny greater than his own permanence. Still, justice demanded that he try. He ran back to the Hall of Rhizomes, interrupted the speeches, and declared, "I am going to the core of Aurora. Bring me shields, bring me protective chants. If we need to rebuild the chalice, let it be now." Part of the council hesitated. Part applauded. Metatron, with a look of infinite calculation, relented. "You will have 12 sentinels and 3 eternal hours. If you do not return before the next pulse of the harmonic rosette drops a tone, we will lose you forever." Elior nodded, accepted the runes of light that seal travelers, and left without looking back. As the entourage of justice tore through the layers of the firmament toward the primordial dawn, Athanael remained with Sariel, recording the last possible lines. Each sentence seemed to absorb a piece of the angel's clarity, as if translating the gesture into words made the gift unrepeatable. The chronicler asked if there was regret. Sariel shook his head, as if remembering a quiet song. If there is regret in an act of love, then it was never love, only a transaction. Then he asked something unexpected, that Athanael open the already written parchment and insert blank space after each paragraph. "Leave gaps," he explained, "so that future hearts may write what they learn from this lost light. Thus, my disappearance will serve as soil for other seeds." Across the sky, Elior and his sentinels reached the core of Aurora. They found it exploding in violent colors, whirlwinds of white, red, and violet boiling like magma at dawn. The protective runes vibrated, but were already showing flaws. One of the companions lost the memory of his own name as he passed through the stream of light, becoming trapped in an endless chant. Elior, with his sword in front of him, opened a rift in the radiation, reminding himself of Sariel's face so as not to forget the mission. They needed to harvest 40 grams of ethereal lumina, a minimum portion capable of recreating a heart crystal. Measuring grams in an environment without material gravity seemed crazy, but each spark has metaphysical mass, and a firm intention was enough to shape it. Elior commands, "Separate into portions of compassion, not weight." The sentinels sing a harmonious hymn, channeling energy into a golden sphere that throbbed to the rhythm of 3 synchronized hearts. When they finally reached the ideal volume, the sphere closed like glass. On the way back, however, Umbriel reappeared. The adverse guardian emerged from a turquoise cloud, blocking the stellar corridor. His voice was filled with echo. "Balance," does not authorize the reconstruction of an exhausted vessel. Return the matter and let creation learn from pain." Elior wielded his sword. There would be no debate. The clash between Ruby Blade and Soot Arm created sparks that turned into a shower of tiny comets streaked away. The sentinels advanced, chanting a song that reverberated like bells. Umbriel retreated, not out of fear but out of calculation. He realized that justice carried legitimate fire. Even so, he released a blast of primordial cold, cutting off the wing of a sentinel. The servant fell in a spiral, dragging part of the golden sphere with him. Elior dove, grabbed the remaining fragment and shot towards the gate, closed seconds before Umbriel reached him. The Guardian remained outside, condemned to watch the rift close with a silent roar. Back at the lake, Sariel was almost falling apart. The bones of light were visible, arching like a bridge about to collapse. Atheniel recited poetry of consolation, but each word seemed like a needle sewing a veil too thin to protect against the final wind. When Elior appeared, holding the golden sphere, Atheniel stood up in disbelief. The archangel put his knee on the luminescent grass and presented the gift. However, rebuilding the chalice required that Sariel still have a core to anchor the crystal. The healer raised a transparent hand, placed it on the sphere, and in a gesture of gratitude, bowed his head. Then, in a voice of twilight, he said, "It will not be enough. My heart is already an open sky. There is no container that is enough." Elior insisted, reminding him of how many lives still needed balm. Sariel replied that the balm would continue to exist, but in another form. Angel pointed to the lake. The water had begun to emit golden streaks, evidence that the dissolved pain was integrating with the matter of paradise, becoming diluted healing capable of reaching earth like breezes of courage, small silent miracles on anonymous streets. "I don't need to walk for goodness to unfold," he explained. "It is enough for me to become a scattered seed." Elior understood, even with invisible tears running down his firm features. Athanael, out of duty to his office, asked, "And the emptiness that remains in you, where will it go?" Sariel smiled. "Where all the paid debts go, it disappears." Metatron arrived at that exact moment, bringing the council's final decree. Upon seeing the untouched golden sphere and Sariel in a state of dissipation, he fell silent. There was no longer any order to apply. Reality had already decided. The scribe simply extended his hand over the healer's head and made a sign of blessing. Then he turned to Elior and Athanael, recommending that they no longer try to stop the natural cycle. Sometimes justice is to accept that love completes destiny beyond our clauses. Hearing this, Sariel stood up for the last time. Each movement released luminous dust that floated like a shower of pollen. He took 3 steps to the edge of the lake. The water opened concentric circles of light. There, he turned to his friends, eyes now only gentle voids, and held out his hands. Elior placed the ruby sword on the healer's translucent fingers. Sariel closed the blade between both palms. The weapon glowed white, dissolved into particles, spiraled upward, and embraced the sky, forming a shining arch that fixed itself between the 2 inner rings of paradise. It was the sign that justice had become definitive mercy. Sariel's body then dissipated in a soundless sigh. Only the golden sphere remained, floating for a second on the water, and then slowly sinking. The moment it touched the bottom, the entire lake lit up, sending columns of light piercing the vault above. On Earth, at the same time, thousands of people woke up without feeling the weight that had crushed them the night before. There were no headlines, no worldly celebrations, only sighs of relief, shy laughter, spontaneous hugs in hospital corridors, and unexpected phone calls of reconciliation. And in the heavens, the harmonic rosette sounded a single note, neither high nor low, but new. inaugurating an unprecedented tone on the scale of infinity. Umbriel, still outside the closed portico, looked at the sky and understood that the balance had undergone a change that not even he could counter. He disappeared into his own shadow, ruminating on a theory about futures in which compassion might be a structural component of the universe, not just an adjustment variable. Athenael closed the parchment with the final sentence. When the cup breaks, the water becomes a river. He folded the text, sealed it with an amber seal, and stored it in the crypt of true stories, which one only enters to remember that hope does not need a container. It molds itself to the space it finds. At the edge of the lake, Ilior stood alone, watching the reflection of the constellations return to him. The image of a warrior without a sword, a weapon now distributed in millions of scintillations over the earth. The archangel took a deep breath and accepted that justice without compassion is just calculation, and compassion without justice is a flame that burns out too quickly. Sariel had taught the perfect fusion, sacrificing oneself. To balance both, a breeze blew down, bringing a delicate perfume that had not existed before, the smell of new leaves after an afternoon rain. Elior finally knew that the miracle had not died with his friend, it had spread. And in this diffusion, paradise found. A new reason to turn each time a human heart, freed from pain, asked itself in wonder, how much does a miracle really weigh? After the golden sphere sank into the lake of eternal glow, paradise began to move again, but no circle was ever quite the same. The columns of star quartz continued to shine, the choirs sang again, but in each chord there was a space where Sariel's presence should have resounded. The waters of the lake, now imbued with threads of light drawn from the core of Aurora, reflect an amber hue that had never existed before. When the breeze blew across the surface, tiny sparks rose into the sky and scattered across the rings, reminding the entire realm that a part of the old order had fallen away so that something new could be born. Far away, in the early hours of the morning in an ordinary neighborhood, a boy rose from his bed without the weight that had held him. Down for months, he knew nothing about painkillers, but he felt the urge to run outside and breathe the cold air just to make sure he was alive. At the same moment, an exhausted nurse in another city wiped her tears and found the energy to tend to another bed. No one explained the connection to them, but both carried traces of the glow that had dripped from the angel's hands, now dissolved into particles as fine as gold dust. Small changes added up across the planet created a day slightly better than the previous one, without announcement or trumpets. High up in the crystal gallery, Metatron observed the energy columns he had been monitoring for ages. The scale that had previously marked increasing losses stabilized into a smooth line, a sign that the risk of collapse had diminished. Even so, the clerk knew that a period of adjustments had begun. He issued a decree ordering a review of the intervention rules. Human pain would no longer be catalogued only as an accounting item, but also as a seed of compassion. This bureaucratic change may sound minimal, but in paradise, the smallest comma alters the destiny of entire galaxies. Umbriel, the opposing guardian, left the stellar corridor where he awaited new orders. When he realized that the sphere of pain had dispersed across the lake in benign light, he understood that the old logic of balance had been redesigned without consultation. It was not defeat, it was a paradigm shift. He returned to the shores of the Echo Threshold, not to keep watch, but to study how the void reacted to the absence of the angel who had absorbed so much sadness. With each whirlwind that arose, he saw the water of the lake shine again, as if the sacrifice continued to respond, even without the bearer present. Umbriel bowed his head and withdrew, determined to learn the new language of the universe before erecting barriers again. Elior stood by the shore until the last fragment of stardust had disappeared into the mist. Then he took off his armor and stuck the remaining blade into the ground, marking a point of remembrance there. Every warrior needs a reason to wield a sword. His now was to protect the seed of compassion that Sariel had sown. Without brute force, but with constant vigilance, he swore to prevent anyone from exploiting the newly freed light for vile purposes. Behind the oath was gratitude, but also recognition. No justice alone reaches as far as an act of extreme love. Athanael concluded the final scroll with a single line. Each life relieved tells the story of one who gave his own spark without demanding anything in return. Then he rolled up the document and placed it among the sealed accounts. He did not seal it with gold or place a padlock, for he decided that the text should be accessible to the next chronicler. When he handed the scroll to an apprentice, he advised, "When someone asks about sacrifice, show this. But remember to leave space for what is yet to come." The young guardian of letters did not understand right away, but he felt a weight of responsibility resting on him. It was a sign that a new generation would have to write new chapters. In the hanging gardens, small angels with opaline wings tested out tonalities of song that had not existed before the harmonic rosette's unprecedented note. Each time one of them got the vibration right, the lake responded with a tiny spark, as if approving the rehearsal. It was no coincidence. Sariel's essence had become a trigger that connected music, healing, and hope. These apprentices, who did not yet fully understand the verb to renounce, soon discovered that every melody carries a hidden cost. But they also understood that paying that cost can produce beauty that spans eras. And you, who have followed the journey from the first second, now know the destiny of the healing angel and the true value of an unreserved gesture of compassion. It may seem that the story ends here, with the golden dust scattered and the sparkling lake. But in practice, it continues with every breath you take, every time you decide to ease someone's pain without expecting applause. There is no longer a crystal chalice. There is an infinite field where any act of kindness can take root and grow. The price has been paid, but the account remains open, inviting new partners to deposit small coins of care. Perhaps tonight you will come across someone who carries shadows in their eyes. Remember Sariel. You won't need wings or visible light to transmit hope. A word, a gesture, sometimes the simple act of listening carefully can move the scales of the universe. The healing angel taught that true strength is not in remaining whole, but rather in choosing to break yourself for the good of others. Those who do this spread fragments of light that others collect without noticing, and little by little, the world moves one step beyond pain. Now it's your turn to keep this flame burning. If this story touched you, show us that it was worth telling. Click the subscribe button to become part of this community that seeks to understand the hidden side of mercy. Press the like button so that the algorithm can bring this light to those who walk in the dark. Write in the comments what touched your heart the most. Maybe your reflection will be the spark that another viewer needs. And don't keep it to yourself. Share the video with friends, family, anyone who feels the weight of discouragement. Together, we can continue to unravel hidden narratives, revealing the untold stories of the heavenly messengers and learning, in each chapter, that the love that gives everything is never lost. It only changes shape, waiting for someone to recognize it and carry it forward.